Hi BookTube, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for another one of those talking about how my reading went in 2023 videos. So, I know a lot of people make videos where they talk about their worst books, or the books that they hated, or the most disappointing, and maybe this qualifies for the most disappointing books, what I'm going to talk about, but I thought the equivalent of that could be the books I DNF'd for the in 2023, which I guess in a way those, like I said, could count as disappointing reads. And some of them I didn't hate, they just were not books for me, or they were just books that, you know, I was excited about and then they just let me down, but I don't bear them a grudge or anything. You know, and some of them, it's my bad, and I should, you know, and assuming that I would like it, and then realizing it's not, you know, like I should have known that it wouldn't be the book for me. Okay, so the first book was a book that was given to me as a gift in 2022 for Christmas, and it was a hardback book, and I feel bad because hardback books are more expensive in the US, and I feel, and it was given to me as a gift. Someone bought the book for me, and I think it was Terry who bought it for me, actually. And I ended up not loving it. It ended up disappointing me a little, and that book is Jim Carrey's memoir, Memoirs and Misinformation, ghostwritten by Dana Vachon. So this book, I started reading it, and first of all, what got me into it, of course, was it's Jim Carrey, a Jim Carrey memoir, and I say memoir in quotes, because I'm a fan of his acting, mostly his dramas, because he does do drama, he doesn't just do comedy. In fact, there's only like maybe one or two of his comedies that I love, which is funny because he's known for his comedy and his outrageous humor, but it's really his dramas that are my favorite movies, or the ones that are dramedies where they have some comedy in it. They will still have some comedic moments. But so I love his work, and I enjoy a memoir on actors that I like, or writers that I like. Mostly it's been actors. And it was a memoir, so I put it on my Amazon wish list, and I received it as a gift, and like I said, for Christmas in 2022. And I started reading it because, like, let me get to this book right away, because I just got it back in December, and I read it, and I was like, let me read it in January, or it might have January or February. And it ended up being not what I wanted. It was odd. It felt weird. It didn't feel like a traditional memoir. And maybe it's not meant to be a traditional memoir. But the thing is, it didn't feel like a memoir at all. It felt like just a regular novel, like a work of fiction. And maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, because, you know, an actor's life can be crazy enough that it could feel like fiction. But it felt like just him taking snapshots of the life of Hollywood scenes and putting them in a book. And maybe they were snapshots of his experiences, but it just felt like fiction. And I think I remember people saying, and the people that didn't love this book, because, you know, because I read through the reviews, and there was a good, even mixture of people that enjoyed the book, and then people who didn't and felt the way I did. And I read them, and yeah, I think a lot of them had the similar thoughts. It felt more like fiction, and it was just hard for me to get into. You know, I mean, it's not that long of a book, and the chapters were kind of short, so I might have been able to get through it if I decided to, but I couldn't connect with it, which I feel bad, because for not only was it a gift, and it was a hardback book that was probably more expensive than if it was a paperback, but it was one of my favorite actors, their memoir. So this kind of disappointed me. I mean, I'm not one of those people who keeps books that I end up not liking, or books that I'm opted to DNF, so I don't have it to show you, but like I said, it's a beautiful cover, actually. Like, I like the color scheme of it. and it kind of shows Jim Carrey's face. And it was just, it wasn't what I wanted. And I feel bad for saying this, but especially about someone's memoir, because like I said, it didn't feel like a memoir. And I don't know if it was a memoir or not. I was very confused by it. So, okay. So the next DNF was a book that I should have known that I couldn't get into, that I wouldn't like. Oh wait, no, go back. Let me, well, before I talk about this one, the one before it was one that I thought I would like because it's in fantasy. It's a fantasy book, and I love fantasy most of the time. You know, there's some fantasy books that I'm just not interested in. And that was The Moon in Its Night. And this was also a book talk book, so a lot of people were talking about this book. And so I thought, let me try this, you know, and the ideas, the back descriptions sounded interesting and intriguing. But here's the thing, the execution was just not, it wasn't good. I mean, it wasn't the worst written book ever, but it was like, it wasn't badly written at all, or at least I don't think so. I mean, it's been a few months now, so I don't remember. I mean, it was very easy reading, and the chapters weren't long, again, but it just didn't, like, there were things in it that were, like, questionable to me, and I feel like the author could have gone through it and changed some stuff a little bit, altered some things, and still have a good story that people will like. And I just, you know, and like I said, I was not feeling this book. I was very disappointed in it. Like, it had potential, and there were elements in it that I thought were pretty good and pretty interesting. And it just wasn't, it was not the fantasy book for me. Little Bit Maddie from A Little Bit Mads has a really entertaining rant video on it, and she's been reading I think she's intending to read the whole series, because she did one on the second book too, and elaborated and talked about the book and explained it all and gave you the plot and the bad aspects of it and everything. So yeah, it was just not, again, not what I was hoping for. Not, you know, it was like I said, it had potential. And that's what's so disappointing. It had potential. If the author had considered and read what she wrote and really thought about what she was writing and changed some things, then maybe I would have been okay with it. But anyway, so the next book, okay, let's get back to the one I started to talk about, but I had forgot about that one. That's the other thing. The book, I forgot about the book. I don't even remember what it's about. I mean, I remember a little bit. Like, I remember two girls that are really close, and they're complete opposites in their physical features, something like that. And but and there's, you know, enslavement involved, which I don't like. Depending on how they execute, that's not necessarily. It's a good show villains, bad people, that there are bad people in the world, and it's important to see that, you know, so that you can be a better person and not follow and make their mistakes, and not be a hateful, greedy person if you see the bad people coming in, you know. But it's a shaky to add certain things, you know, add stuff, concepts like that in stories. But okay, again, so let's get back to the one I was first going to start talking about, but then I remembered that one. And that is a book that I should have known that I wouldn't like it, that I couldn't get into it, but I got cocky and I felt confident, and I was like, oh, let me just try it. I might actually find it fascinating, interesting. So it is a nonfiction, and, you know, I've been trying to focus more on my nonfiction reads and reading more and more nonfiction as the years progress, and like just adding on to my nonfiction repertoire each year. And that is Origin of the Species by Charles Darwin. This is a famous classic. In case you don't know, Charles Darwin was this scientist who he sailed on the SS Beagle to the Galapagos Islands. He was researching the wildlife. He invented the concept. I think he came up with the concept of the theory of evolution and survival of the fittest and all that. He wrote all these notes, and it became a book. that everybody reads and studies. It's very famous, in case you don't know. And I saw it at the Roast Office at Gibbons Bookshop, and so I only spent like $4 on it. So that isn't, not terrible. And it's just very dense and very detailed. And because I'm not as passionate about the subject matter, I don't care as much about it. It was hard for me to get into it and really appreciate it and be willing to take the time to read all these descriptions and all these lists and facts he gives and explains. And of course, I'm literary. I'm smart I'm intelligent in some ways. Like, I'm intelligent when it comes to, like, I like history, and I'm smart when it comes to literature, I think. But science and math, not my forte. As I always say now, not my strongest suit. So, I don't know, I don't understand science concept. I understand, now, if someone explains to me, like, verbalized in a layman's terms, then maybe I can understand it. But reading a book that's basically a textbook and written in the 1800s or 1700s or whatever, it just wasn't for me. It was just too much, and I was like, it wasn't keeping me awake. I was bored, and it was just very dense, so unless you're someone who's really interested in learning about the Galapagos Islands and wildlife, and you're interested in the theory of evolution and nature and all that, I think it's just not, it's not the science fiction book unless you're interested in that subject matter. I mean, do you think it's interesting how even nonfiction still have the writing styles altered to make it a little less dense in today's nonfiction, and it's a little easier to read. But so yeah, that is just not the book. It was not the book for me, and I should have known that I couldn't get into it. I was just thinking it's a classic, and I should try it, and I might like it. I might actually get into it, and no, I didn't. I should have known better. Okay, next is, let's see, what was the next? Okay, I think next is another science-related book, but it's science fiction. And I feel bad because I was telling a channel that I've been watching a lot lately, Science Literature Alliance. I was commenting on her video because I was trying to get more active in my commenting, and I was saying, I'm going to read this book that you love, and I'm excited, and then I felt bad because I realized it wasn't the book for me, and I didn't love it. I didn't like it. And that was The Best of All Possible Worlds. I don't remember the author's name. I should have looked at the author. And it was kind of, I hate to say it, but kind of boring. I couldn't get into it, and I feel bad for saying that, but, it's just, like, I'm very picky about my science fiction, and if it's too focused on explaining the science, then I might not love it. Like, Jurassic Park was an exception, and I think it helped that I was familiar with the movie, and it just was kind of boring, like I said, and I just couldn't get into it, and, there's a reason, like, I love Doom because it feels more like it, if you take out the science elements of it, and put it, and give it some fantasy elements, like, make it, like, if you blur the lines, then, you can easily do that. Like, I like science fiction where it kind of blurs the line between fantasy and science fiction, which I know some people probably say, well, then just stick with fantasy. But there's some science fiction that I find really interesting. Like, there's some science fiction I like. Like I said, like Dune. But it's just science fiction, I'm starting to realize that it just I might never really fully get into it. Because I'm not a science person. And, heavily dense science fiction that really, like, takes the time to explain the science and everything and focus on the science and, like, all that is just, like, I can watch science fiction, the visual, like, in a movie or a TV show. Like, I could potentially do that over reading about it in a book, because if someone is explaining it and I don't have to read it. Like, someone is telling me. And sometimes with movies and TV shows, they're realizing that they have a more universal audience, where they're not just science people and like science geeks. Sorry, it's, it's just like, it just, sorry, I hope I don't offend anyone by saying science geeks. I mean, I consider myself a geek and a nerd. So I just hope I don't mean to offend anyone if I'm called, like, saying science geeks, but, science geeks who, love science and, are fascinated by it and love exploring it and trying to understand the universe and how it works and how certain things work. You're not just, science fiction movies aren't just for those people. You also have the people that like, adventure stories and, people that just want to have a good time and enjoy the ride and go on this adventure. And that's why I think time travel is such a universally easy to get into, science fiction wise, because, like, you're not always, you have the science with the time machine or whatever device they're using to travel through time, but you also have the characters. They could travel to the future or they could travel to the past, and like, so you get a little bit of history, or you get a little, you get cool technology, futuristic technology, you get robots and battles and people trying to survive, so I think, in time travel stories and superhero stories can work for anyone. Even if you're not a science fiction fan, they can still work for anybody, because they have elements in them that are universal, that aren't just focused on the science part. But this was definitely focused on the science, was more for science fiction people that enjoy a good science fiction story, and I'm not one of those people. I've been trying to get into science fiction, but I just can't. I prefer, either I will rather watch a science fiction story, or, it has to be one that is considered science fiction, but could be placed in a fantasy story. I mean, that's probably why my first space and traveling through space and time show that I ever got into, that wasn't, before Back to the Future, and after Back to the Future and all that, was Star Wars. Because, even my friend Terry was all like, it's fantasy, and I'm thinking, no, it's not, because it involves aliens, and you're living in space. And I don't think, and she was talking about how the powers of the Jedi feels like science, like fantasy, and I'm, for me, it's not fantasy, because, using your mind, using your brain power to do certain things feels more like a science thing, but it blurs the line a little bit. So even though I'm would debate with her about it being fantasy and say, no, to me it's science fiction, no, it's science fiction, I think the reason why I got into it is because you can do that. It can be either fantasy or sci-fi. So anyway, yeah, so long story short, science fiction, I will not entirely give up on getting into science fiction, but at this point, I don't know if I'll ever get into it truly and be a hardcore fan. In fact, I DNF Children of Time too, so I should really add that one to the list, because I did decide. But the reason why I didn't think about it at first was because I don't think I started reading Children of Time in 2023. I think I started reading in 2022 or 21. But yeah, because it takes a lot of time explaining, and for similar reasons to All Possible Worlds, I just couldn't get into it. It was just too much explaining of the science and all that kind of stuff. Is just, so yeah, I guess I'm just not a science fiction person. I like some of them if they feel a little bit like fantasy, And anyway, so yeah, so Children of Time technically is on this list too. Next is the other. Then I also DNF'd a book that I borrowed from the library, and I just, at the time, I was just not feeling it. It was very slow going, and you guys know that when it comes to books from the library, I don't like borrowing books from the library when they're slow, and I know they're going to take me a long time to read, because I don't want to have to keep renewing it, and, I'm even taking a risk sometimes with the Libby app, with some of the books I get from there. But at least with that, you can alter the speed of the audiobook a little bit so you can get through it quicker. The only problem with that is that takes away a little bit of the enjoyment of the story, and I think in the beginning of listening to Good Omens, that technically messed me up a little bit to really enjoy the story. But I still like Good Omens, but I think I would prefer watching the show in that case. So, but I didn't DNF that one. In a way, it's one of the few books that I didn't DNF that was a bit of a letdown. Like, not entirely a letdown, but just, I didn't love the book as much as I thought I would. I mean, maybe if I physically read it myself, maybe I would have enjoyed it more. But I do think I would enjoy the show more than listening or reading the book than I did listening to the book. But anyway, so let's get back. So I ended up, so this is kind of more of a soft DNF, and that is Natasha Pulley's The Kingdoms, which I love the cover. The cover is really cool, and I like the green aesthetic. Like, I've always been, intrigued by green covers. Not like that neon alien green, but like other shades of green I really like. But this is one that was kind of slow, and I liked it was beautifully written, and I don't remember what it was about, but I feel like potentially I could have liked it if I could give that book another shot if I wanted to, but I just wasn't into it. I was not feeling it. And like I said, I was feeling a little bit of pressure of being like, okay, I have to take this back at some point, and I don't want to keep renewing it because I don't know how long it's going to take me to read it. So I was just, let me just DNF this for now. Maybe in the future I'll come back to it. Maybe I'll one day be inspired to buy it or something, Ideally, it'll probably be better to get it from the Givens bookshop where it'll be really cheap, so that if I end up not loving it, then it won't be a total waste of money. But yeah, I don't even remember what it's about. Like I said, really the only reason why I decided was, because I was feeling anxious and pressured, and I was not feeling it at the time, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna let go of this book and come back to it. And also I think I got multiple books, like more than 2 or 3 books at the time, and that's one of my bad habits. I know it's not necessarily a bad habit, but it's one of those things that there are too many books for me to read, and then I have all my own books that I want to read and get to assure that my mom that the books I buy aren't just sitting there, that I'm actually reading them. So this had, so I could always come back to this one. So this is one of my rare soft DNFs. And that's The Kingdoms by Natasha Pulley. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to think of what, I think I need to look at, okay. I normally try not to do this, but I need to look at my Goodreads. Oh, duh. Sorry, I always wonder what you guys are seeing when I move the screen, like make the screen disappear. I totally forgot, because the next books are classic, one of them's a classic, and that is, and again, I feel bad because it's a classic, but you know what? Not every classic is going to be universally loved. Not every classic is above reproach. Some of these classics you can criticize, and some of them you don't have to love every classic. Just because a lot of people love it does not mean you have to love it. And that is Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I loved East of Eden, and I liked Of Mice and Men. which it helped that one was short. Because if I was reading a whole novel with those two guys, then I don't know if I would have loved it as much. Not that they were bad characters, but I just didn't connect as strongly with them. But I just feel bad and it was a sad book, and I felt for the characters. I just didn't, like, I don't know if I would want to read, 500 plus pages with those characters. But anyway, but of Grapes of Wrath, which I should have known because when my dad bought tickets to see the play at Ford's Theater in DC, and I fell asleep at the time, but granted I was really tired because I have been going to bed late. I mean, it was even worse back then, and I still to this day feel terrible about it because he spent the money, and it's not cheap buying tickets to an actual, a stage show in a theater in DC. It's probably a little bit cheaper than than New York, than Broadway, but it still was not cheap, and I feel bad because my dad went and spent the tickets thinking I would like it, and I don't know if it was a gift or he just decided to buy it because it was coming, it was there. It might have been a birthday gift or something, and I feel terrible because of that. I still to this day. But yeah, this should have been a sign that I wasn't gonna love the book. I'm sorry, again, I'm using the B word here, and to say it was kind of boring, and I just could not get into it. I didn't connect with the characters at all, and I just, in fact, some of them I didn't really like. And, I feel bad for saying this, because it's about important time in history, and, so is the other one, not in art. So is the next one I'm going to talk about. Now, it's not our history. The next book isn't about our history. It's about history in another country. But, you know what? I just wasn't feeling the book. I didn't love it, and I was kind of bored, and not a lot was going on. Stories where characters are traveling from place to place doesn't always work, especially if you have more time to spend with them, unless you make the conversations really, really interesting for someone like me. Sometimes those travel stories aren't gonna always be fun, and which I'm taking a risk with Lonesome Dove, but a lot of people sing its praises and talk about how great it is, and some of those people are people that I've, trust their recommendations, at least for now. And but it was just, and there was no hopeful note in the story. I mean, maybe there is, with the wherever there's a blah blah blah, I'll be there. I don't remember the line. There might be a hopeful note towards the end, but it just seemed a very depressing story. And I know not everything has to be all happy, and history doesn't always end on a happy note. History is depressing, can be depressing and tragic, and I don't expect every book to be happy for me that I enjoy. I'm not saying it has to be, but I want something hopeful, and I just wasn't. In this case, I did want something hopeful, and I just was not loving this book. I didn't love the characters, and, the characters were kind of just, for me. And I didn't connect the story. I feel and you know what? I shouldn't have to. If I don't feel it, if I'm not connecting with the story, or, I'm bored with the story, or I don't like it for some other reason, then I'm allowed to feel that way. And just because it's a classic doesn't mean you have to be it has a lot of literary merits, or emphasize the fact, well, objectively, it's a good book. Just because objectively it's good and is considered a classic does not mean that subjectively it's the book for me. That's the problem. That's, I think, the problem when it comes to classics. Because objectively, the book will probably be, it's a classic for a reason, and it probably makes it automatically a good book, but not necessarily for individual people. There are individuals that, when it comes to reading, everyone has their own taste in books that interest them, and classics don't always interest every single person. There are reasons that there are a lot of people that don't read classics. So, I just, and so far no one has said anything to me in my videos or my comments or whatever if I've talked about this book. I don't think I've talked about it a lot anyway. But I always feel like I have to, justify, explain and be mentally, and prepare that ahead of time, that before you say anything to me and tell me, how dare you not love Grapes of Wrath, Remember, you don't have to love every classic, and I'm sure there are classics that a lot of people sing praises, but you don't love. That's allowed. Just because a classic does not mean that, like I said, it's above reproach or that it's above people not loving it. Like, people cannot love every classic. So the next book, I feel bad again for not loving this book. I mean, it was beautifully written, and it's about a tragic time in history in India. You know, in like persecution of groups of people and all that. But in concern, I just read a book that that is about that, which I feel like I connected more with the book that I just finished because it's in my own, you know, it's part of my own heritage. Even though I'm not full on Filipino, it's still like I still feel connected to it in a little bit more so than this book. But I do still want to read books that, you know, either contemporary books or, well, not contemporaries and contemporary set stories, but, you know, books about Indian history and some of the mythology in India and all that kind of stuff. I still want to read that kind of stuff. But this just wasn't a hit for me. And that is a fine balance. And some of the characters I didn't connect with. In other words, I feel bad for saying this, but there was one character that just kind of irritated me. And yeah, I can't even imagine what these characters are going through. I can't understand it. Yes, that's true, but that doesn't change how I feel about this book. Like, just because I can't understand how these characters feel, like, that's not gonna make me all of a sudden be like, it's a good book because, oh, I can't understand, so I should automatically love it. You know, because I have no, you know, oh, I can't criticize. It's like, I'm not criticizing the book. I think it was beautifully written, great, you know, I think the characters were probably objectively good. But I couldn't get into it, and I wanted a note of hope. And yeah, maybe during this time there was no hope at all. Maybe it's not fair of me to say that I want hope, because but it was a fictionalized version. It's a work of fiction. And so I can hope they can give, like, hope. And if this author wanted to be more, and fine, maybe this author wanted to be more realistic because it's history, it's about this history of this time, but, and there probably was no hope. But like I said, I'm not obligated to, just because I'm reading this book for fun. Which I know may be bad to say that, but I'm reading this book for pleasure, to experience this, you know, disappear into another world or another country and enjoy a story, even though it's about some actual history and tragedy and all that in this other country. You know, I mean, that's why people read historical fiction, for escapism, and also it allows you to appreciate your own life when you read books like this. But like that, I just wasn't connecting with it. I just didn't, and I don't have to connect to every book to enjoy it. I don't have to do that. But I just wasn't feeling the book. And I was not in the mood for a tragic story. And, you know, I don't want to keep a book on my shelf because I don't know if I'm ever going to get in the mood for that book. You know, so I'm trying to eliminate and remove books from my shelf and eventually donate it. So, you know, I'm not one of those people who's going to, you know, put the book back and be like, oh, I'll come back to it later. I might actually love it. Like, I don't do a lot of soft DNFs, you know. It's rare for me because I don't like the book sitting there and feel like, am I really ever going to come back to this book? Like, I only say it because I feel bad that I DNF'd it. But yeah, so A Fine Balance is a beautifully written book, and it's just not the book for me. Okay, so next, the last book I DNF'd was The Ghost Stories of Edith Wharton. I love Edith Wharton's writing style, and I was debating about if I wanted to keep going with her works, because I didn't, like, love every single one of her all the plots I've read by her, because, but I did like them so far, and I was just like, and I kept going back and forth about her and being like, should I move on from her work or give her another shot or whatever? And I finally decided that I was going to give her another shot recently because of the Gilded Age and some of the actors involved in the Gilded Age, and they mentioned Edith Wharton being the inspiration for the show. And then, Julianne Fellows is a fan of her work, and I did like her writing and her stories. I didn't have a problem with them. I liked them well enough. Like, I just didn't love them. They weren't all-time favorites. I am really enjoying one of her other works that I'm reading currently. But yeah, Ghost Stories, her Ghost Stories collection, I only read 3, so maybe, I guess I could have read more of her Ghost Stories. But I was just like, okay, let me let this go because it's going to be sitting there and I don't want to feel the pressure of having to read, feeling like, oh, I better read this because I might like the other ones. The other ones might not disappoint me, and I didn't want to feel that pressure because eventually it'll make me less inclined to her work, to reading it. And, like I said, I feel like I've been very spoiled when it comes to horror, and, like with science fiction, sometimes with horror, I prefer to watch it over reading it, but I am more prone to read a horror book. But it just takes a lot to scare me or to make me think about it. Like, I did, there are a handful that I really absolutely love. And like I said, one of the things I love about Stephen King is he has great character work. The characters that I'm interested in, that I want to know more about and I want to understand better. Even the horrible people. And then, like, there's other horror books that explore themes that I'm intrigued by that I want to know more about. So I'm like, and if it's a book that makes me want to keep going, not because I want to finish this book, but because I want to know how the characters are going to get out of this situation, what's going to happen next. Like Nosferatu, I kept reading because although there were some scary, disturbing stuff in that book, especially with Bing's character, and he's not even the physical monster, or not the monster in a literal sense of creature with horns or multiple eyes or teeth or like whatever. He was just a human person that was doing monstrous things. But I wanted to know what was going to happen. I was definitely riveted to the story. I wanted to know, how are they going to get out of this? Are they going to kill the monster? Are they going to kill Charlie Manx? Are they going to stop him? What's going to happen to Vic and her son? And are they going to get out of this? Is she going to lose her son? Or, all those questions I want to know the answer. Is someone ever going to stop Bing? Is he going to just keep getting away with what he's doing to the parents of these children Charlie takes? There were so many questions as I was reading, and I was like, I wanted Vic to defeat the monster. I wanted Charlie, or more so Bing, because Charlie is, like I said, he's a monster in an otherworldly sense. Although he probably was human at one point. Like, there's a graphic novel about it. I think that probably talks about how he was probably human at some point. But I wanted Bing to be punished for what he was doing. So, a horror book has to do that. Make me want to know what's going to happen next and make me think about it and just, want to reread it again at some point soon. So these ghost stories were just they were kind of boring. I didn't like. There were a couple the two of them I liked, but then there was one I just didn't like at all because they spent too much time. Each one spends too much time elaborating on why the character is being haunted, and all the selfish things he was doing. Like the creepy parts were in the beginning and not right at the end, not right before the end. I guess in the way the climax. I did like the afterward, and the Lady Maid's Bell was good, but the Eyes was a letdown. And yeah, maybe I could have read the other ones, but like I said, I would feel pressure, and I wouldn't feel as motivated to read it because of that pressure. Because once I decide that I'm not feeling a book, then, most likely I'm just delaying the inevitable and I need to just let it go. But yeah, so that was the last book I DNF'd. I would love to know what were books that you DNF'd or books that you maybe shouldn't have finished, but you did. Or books that you just, well, I guess that's it. Books that you either DNF'd or should have DNF'd. I would love to know in the comments section below what those books are, if you had any of them, or maybe you just had a really good reading year and there weren't any books that you wanted to DNF or thought were bad books. So if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, click subscribe if you haven't already, click the bell notification button below if you want to be notified about my latest videos, and I hope you are enjoying your reading for the first month of 2024, and I will talk to y'all later. Alright, bye!